Hi, Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions, the 5 for 5, although sometimes I go a little over 5 minutes, don't I? For Wednesday, November the 9th, 2022. This past Sunday was All Saints Sunday, at least we celebrated as All Saints Sunday, so we'll be talking about All Saints Day and what that means. Talked a little bit yesterday about the difference within Christian traditions. All Christians recognize Christians past and present as being saints, but in the Roman Catholic tradition, for example, there's a special category of special saints. Lutherans don't do that. Lutherans tend to put everyone all together, and because no one is so perfect as to be singled out. There's a story about two brothers who were famous criminals in the city that they lived in. There seemed to be no crime in which these brothers were not involved, whether it was murder, illegal gambling, you name it, they were involved in it. Well, as time would have it, the older of the two brothers died, and while trying to make funeral arrangements, the younger brother offered $10,000 to any minister or priest who would say in his eulogy that the older brother was a saint. Well, after so many phone calls, he could find no pastor or priest who would be willing to do the funeral and say that his brother was a saint. And just about the end of his rope, the younger brother finally found this young minister who agreed to do the funeral and say that the brother was a saint. And at the funeral, the minister got up, and this is what he said. "The man who lies in this casket before you today was a liar, a cheat, a swindler, involved in all sorts of organized crime, was linked to several murders, but compared to his younger brother, this man was a saint." As Lutherans, we talk about the idea that we're all saints and sinners. We're both at the same time. Saints because we've been justified by grace through faith. We've made right with God through Jesus Christ. But we continue to sin. We continue to make mistakes and disobey and rebel. And we're both at the same time. It's sort of like the fact that, I'm a husband. I'm also a father. I'm both things at the same time. I'm not like one some of the time and the other time. It's like that way with saint and sinner. We are both. There's a phrase I heard, to dwell above with the saints we love, that'll be glory. But to dwell below with the saints we know, well, that's a different story. The story is also told about a rather pompous-looking deacon who was endeavoring to impress upon this class of boys in Sunday school the importance of leading a Christian life. He said, "Why do people call me a Christian?" he asked them, and nobody answered. And finally, after a little bit of a pause, one boy said, "Well, maybe it's because they don't know you." Our Lutheran understanding of saints is that we are saints because we have been forgiven. And we remain to this day in all of our lives as people who fall short of the glory of God, as Paul wrote in Romans 3. George Farrell, the late George Farrell, who was a professor of religion at the University of Iowa, wrote a commentary on the Augsburg Confession that I quoted from a couple weeks ago in talking about David, but his words certainly apply here as well. He says, "We all need models to help us share our lives. The so-called saints," he says, "are helpful because they show us how other people have faced problems similar to ours in similar situations." The example which the Augsburg Confession uses is King David. It says that he should serve as an example for the German emperor. Well, the interesting thing about David is that he was everything but a saint in the ordinary sense of this word. In ordinary language, a saint is a person who does nothing wrong, who is perfect. You don't have to be an expert Bible scholar to know that David was no such saint, says Farrell. He had problems with everybody. Many of them were his own fault. He had difficulties with his boss, Saul, mistreated his employees, Uriah, had a terrible record with women, Bathsheba, and managed to raise his son as a first-class juvenile delinquent, Absalom. Nevertheless, he was a saint according to the Augsburg Confession simply because he was a sinner who depended entirely on God's grace and was sustained in all the vicissitudes of his life, many of them of his own making, by his faith in God's power and love. David helps us not because he was so perfect, but because he was so obviously imperfect. Since God was willing to show his steadfast love to David, we have every reason to hope that he will show his steadfast love to us as well. The story of David does not merely tell us that God is love. It shows us what God's love means in the case of an extraordinarily gifted, complicated, disobedient, and selfish man who, in spite of all of his shortcomings, trusted God and was saved. We are all called to be saints. By virtue of our baptism, we are all saints. We are also all sinners. But we trust in God's grace and mercy and forgiveness through Jesus Christ. Well, we'll continue our conversation about saints and all that entails tomorrow. Hope you have a great day today. Take care. Bye.